احنا لايف.
السلام عليكم. معكم دكتور ميلاد عبد السلام. صباح الخير. صباح الخير من أستراليا. هسه عندنا الساعة 4 صباحا. آه، ومرحبا بكم. And thank you for allocating the time, your time today for this session. Time is your most precious asset, so I really appreciate taking the time to be part of this session. As a start, I'd like to get an idea of how many of you are pioneers, how many are rising stars, how many are government innovators, and how many are entrepreneurs. Just sort of a quick chat. وعليكم السلام أستاذة عائشة. فلو أمكن يعني just شيء ادوني quick rising star غفران ما شاء الله. وعائشة عائشة rising star pioneer. أوه ما شاء الله عائشة. يس فقدناكم يا ستة عائشة المرة اللي فاتت، لكن إن شاء الله نعوضكم اليوم إن شاء الله. طيب عشان ما نعطلكم، انتم ما شاء الله جيتوا على مواعيدكم. احنا هنبتدي وايه الباقيين ممكن يحصلونا. انا هستأذنكم هتكلم بالانجليزي على اساس انه ايه it's easier to do this مع الماتيريال اللي انا I'm delivering. إن شاء hopefully it should be okay with you. All right. All right. So let's start inshallah. يلا بسم الله. This seminar or this training is all about how you can differentiate your product or service to the others. To make it easier for everyone and so that they can actually appreciate what I'm trying to do, I would like to think of your team as actually a company, right? So you're actually being approached by the government, the Dubai, it could be Dubai municipality or somebody else, and you've been asked to look at a certain problem and you are required to provide a solution. So what I think of you as a company, let's call it software as a service or solution as a service. So you're being approached and you are one of a group of other companies who are competing for the business. So you'll be as a first step competing between other players as you are here at the hackathon, in terms of highlighting that you have the skills and expertise to actually deliver on the solution. But at the same time, once you get through from the other competitors, you still need to bid to the client. In this case, is the Dubai municipality, to actually give you the work. So it's very important that you actually sort of put on your business hat and see that, yes, this is competitive. You're not going to get the work. Sorry, you're not going to be selected to pitch, if you like, to the Dubai government until you actually are okay or good compared to the other hackathon teams, right? Please feel free if during the session you have any questions. So I will note if they are within the context of the presentation, then I will answer them straight away. If they are not, I will park them and we'll start towards the end. So now I know, right? I know sort of that your rising stars. So we agreed. So as I said, put on your business hat. So imagine that you've set up the company now and that you are being invited among other teams from the hackathon, and the client, in this case, the representatives, are trying to choose or shortlist some of you to present to them. So you need to be aware or if you like, find out what makes you stand out. So differentiation, right? And that's essentially what we are trying to do. As you can see from the graphic here, there's only one red dot. I want you at the end of the session to have enough knowledge, tools, and other ways of highlighting yourself or standing out from the crowd, right? Ideally, I would like you to move to what I like to call branding, a brand. So you're actually setting things up. So when people hear your name, then they know that you are a good software company. For example, if we hear Microsoft, or if we hear Apple, or if we hear SAP, then we know that we are dealing with a reputable branded company, right? And that's essentially a higher level of differentiation. And so what I mean by that is, if you look here on the left-hand side of your screen, there is an apple. So if you are selling apples, that's it, just one apple. But if you look on the right hand, you'll see the apple symbol. So that's a brand. So it's not just a logo, right? It's a brand in a sense that it actually gets you thinking about what, if you like, the people who use Apple, right? So for example, as you can see at the bottom of the screen here, you have the symbol for Ferrari, for a Rolex, or for a Pierre Cardin. So whenever you see that, if you're seeing somebody riding a Ferrari, that conveys a certain person, sort of affluence, or of got there and so on. Rolex is the same, right? Pierre Cardin is the same. So that's really the ultimate of the differentiation, is you're creating a brand where people who use you or buy your product have certain characteristics, right? And that's essentially, if you like, the ultimate. But today I'll be focusing mainly on the differentiation, right? But hopefully with the aim of at some stage actually becoming a brand. So we have the software brand of your company, right? The next three slides, or the next three questions I have are very important. Why are they important? They're important so that you look at your team or your company and confirm that, yes, you're able to, if you like, differentiate yourself. So if those prerequisites are not there, then as I like to say, loop back and fix it. So for example, it could be that you are bidding for work that some skills are missing. So you need to complement the team. It may mean that you are not ready yet to start your own company. Perhaps then go back and review why not, and so on. So it's important to have a tick mark on all those three before you proceed to the next stage. So the first one is it a business? Right? Are we looking at opportunities? So, for example, if this is a Dubai municipality, then yes, it is. They are looking at you to provide software solutions or software as I said before. So it's as a service, software as a service. However, many times, and we probably, I'm sure you can relate to this, you find that you're doing something, but nobody is really willing to pay for it, right? I mean, like they might invite you for, again, using the government example, they might invite you, hey, this is a problem and so on, and you spend time and effort, but you're not paid for it. You're not reimbursed, right? Or the last one opportunity is that, yes, the government is looking at doing that solution, but you don't have, your team doesn't have the expertise, right? And that's for example, that you don't have experience of how the government works, or you don't understand the process, or your business analyst comes back and saying, no, we don't really know that. So it's very important before you start is to make sure that it is a potential business. Let's say there's money in it, your team has the expertise, and that you can actually deliver the solution you are proposing. So the other reason, which is again important, because that will motivate you, especially when you are running a business, right? Where there is no money coming in, right? You need to consider of how you will, support yourself. You need to consider what will motivate you, because you will face challenges. In my experience, I have had 2 companies I set up, which we'll talk about later, right? It's very important that you are sort of motivated, passionate about going into business, right? So, for example, here in your case, say you maybe you're looking at, you want to make a difference, right? So you want to leave this world a better place. So you're trying to make it easier for people to deal with government. And maybe you're also passionate about it. Like, you've been working in government for a while. You have seen so many things that, you say, hey, there must be a better way of doing this, right? And you've already been helping out. So you've already been helping out, with sort of changes to that. So why not make it a business? Why not make it something that can actually make you money? Or it could be personal branding. I mean, it's I don't know your experience, but in many places I work, there are usually a couple of people who are very good in IT. So whenever something goes wrong, people go to them and say, ask Muhammad, ask Alia, ask Muna, ask Hassan, right? And so these guys are recognized as good in IT, right? So why not make it a business, right? The last thing is you as a company and you as a person, right? Can you actually do it? I mean, have you looked at it? In this case, again, I would use the example of your pitch to the Dubai municipality, right? As you're hearing what they are asking you to do, right? You look at your team. Does your team have the expertise? Do you know who are the competitors? Like, who else is actually bidding or being like shortlisted for the same project, right? Are you and your team ready? Like, I mean, can you support yourself during the work? Because some of those projects, the money might come at the end of it. So will you have enough funds? So it's very important to have all these 3 ticked, right? So you are ready, that there is money in the business, and you actually have the expertise to deliver it. All right. Hopefully by now, you're all sort of saying yes, nodding your heads, saying yes, I agree, I can do that, I'm ready, I'm keen, I'm passionate. So then we can actually proceed to the next. And I say congratulations to this stage. Right. Now we are, if you like, in the stage of looking at what to do next, right? And this is probably the most important slide, in the sense that it spells out the clear steps or the clear pathway for you to be able to sort of clinch that deal, if you like, right? Or get that business, right? And here I would, as I said again, generalizing. So it could be either the client or the user, in this case the government, or it could be a consumer directly, or selling something directly to the consumer. So different things, but they all have the same five steps, if you like, in terms of what's actually required, right? So know your competitors, know your audience, in this case, users and the government entity, or it could be buyers. Identify your niche, right? It's very important. This is key requirement in your differentiation is that you have a niche. So once people hear the name of your company, right? Like in my case, for example, I actually call it finding your niche, right? So whenever they hear the name finding your niche, they know what you're all about. And then once you have that information, like you know what your competitor, you know what the client wants, you know what's your niche, then you can actually develop what I call a differentiation strategy. And like everything else, it needs to be reviewed. You have to keep revisiting things because the environment changes, client changes, requirements change. So you need to be able to go back and tweak it if you like. Right. So the first of the 5 steps. You need to really understand your competitors, right? It's probably easy for you now with the hackathon team, so you've probably seen the other teams, you know what their skills are and so on. But sometimes that's harder, especially if you start expanding outside the government and you try and sell your software or your product to outsiders, right? And here on your left-hand side, I'm identifying three things. There are direct competitors in these other software houses, which can actually deliver products. So these are direct ones, right? Secondary or indirect competitors. And here I will use the example of what I call cassette players, CDs, and so on, because that you can then visualize what I mean, right? So when somebody wants to listen to music, right? Previously, and that's for the older people like us, you used to have cassette tapes, right? So if you were a producer of cassette tapes, TDK or some other brand, you'll be looking at other cassette makers. However, there are indirect competitors. And what I mean by that in this case are CDs, right? So even though you think of yourself as a cassette maker, no, you are in the market of providing music. So anybody who can provide music is a competitor to you, right? So in this case, CDs or manufacturer of CDs are indirect competitors, right? There is a substitute competitor, right? Essentially, which replaces you completely, right? And in this case, you know, the MPEGs and other digital alternatives, right? So all of a sudden, so it's not, your competitors are not other manufacturers of cassettes or CDs. They're actually the ones who produce the digital music. And of course, as we all know, that substitute competitor actually killed the cassette and the CD. So it just shows you that when you're looking at the competition, you also need to look at the broader one. So, and the key thing here is identifying what is my market. Your market is not producing cassette tapes. Your market is actually providing people with music, right? So any provider of music, whatever format, whatever type, is a competitor, right? And then once we do that, once we know that, then we look at the products, right? So in your case, here I can again go back to the software example, and you need to look at is the product usable? Is it user friendly? Does it have a good graphical user interface? Are you pricing yourself competitively, right? I mean, you could have a very good product, but your pricing is way above everybody else, right? Are you marketing it well, right? Do you have the proper logo? Are you well known? Do people in the municipality know you, right? And so on. So you're really looking at different things to compare with your competitor, and it's important to do that systematically. And by that, I'm giving you 2 tools here, which are usually used to do that systematic comparison. A well-known one is called the SWOT analysis, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The first two, the strengths and weaknesses, are the internal. You may be familiar with it, but I will go over it for those who are not, right? The strengths or weaknesses are essentially relating to your own company or team, right? And the opportunities and threats are the outside, essentially something you cannot control. So for example, let's again go back to your software company or solution as a service company, and you look at your team and you say, hey, I have one of the best graphical user interface developers in the group here, right? So that's the strength. you're able to have a good intuitive user interface, right? So that's a strength. A weakness may be something you find out that perhaps you're not very good at marketing yourselves. You have a very good product, but you are not marketing yourself well, or perhaps underselling yourself and so on. So it's important to know what are your weaknesses. And as I said, this is all in comparison with the other competitors you identified in the previous slide. And the opportunity, essentially, that's to say that there is a business out there. And as I said before, in your case, the government is coming out and say, hey, I want to move towards zero bureaucracy. So there is an opportunity. There is a client there who is willing to pay for you to come up with a solution, right? The threats, again, are external, and that could be a change of policy. Like, for example, it could be that there is a change of focus, and the focus is, for example, considered like COVID, when COVID came along, right? That changed the activities of many government departments. So a lot of things were dropped, and other things took priority. So that's a threat. So essentially, a change in the demand or in the opportunity. The other tool, which you can also use, is known as Porter's 5 forces, right? And this is now, this is more in terms of products now, as opposed to software, right? But it shows you, again, it's the external and internal, right? So you can see that it has something similar to what we have looked at. So threat of substitute products or services, the bargaining power of suppliers, because if you are in a space where there's only one supplier, this is a very poor situation, because the supplier knows that, and they might push their weight, or bargaining power of buyer, right? If for example, your software is designed only for government, then that's a risk to your business, because it means that if there are no government contracts, or if you don't get any business with government, you're out of business. So perhaps look at modifying or adapting your product so it can actually have more than one buyer. So that's always a risk. Like in my case, when I was, because I worked for 13 years in government, and my very first appointment was exactly helping IT firms sell software to government. So it's exactly what you guys are trying to do now. So I'm very familiar with these things, and one. So it should be, apologies for the mistake here, it should be bargaining power of buyers. So please accept my apologies, right? So in my case, I was always sort of briefing IT firms in terms of, sort of broadening the scope of their potential clients. And this is an image of Andy Grove, or Andrew Grove. He's the CEO of, or used to be CEO of Intel, right? And he produced a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And I'm sure you're familiar with Intel and Intel chip. It's still surviving, still out there. And this just shows you that no matter how good you are, you continuously need to look at your competition. You continuously need to be paranoid about the competition, and because that's the only way you survive. And I'll give you an example of that. Yeah, so I'll give you an example of that. I'm not sure if you have seen, there is a film called BlackBerry, right? And it's for those of you interested in looking at how large companies fail because they don't look at the competition or don't understand the competition. BlackBerry is a very good film, right? Essentially, it's about the Canadian company Research in Motion, RIM, and their production of the BlackBerry. And for those who are not familiar with the BlackBerry, it used to it replaced something called the pager. Before the phones, before the mobile and so on, the only way to contact other people or staff in a company was through a pager. Essentially a device which you can send messages to. Right? Think of it as a mobile phone with just messaging functionality, nothing else, right? So so if you had to be on call, you'll get a message on your pager saying, please call this number and so on. And then BlackBerry came along and actually produced essentially a mobile phone with a keyboard, right? And it had a huge monopoly on the market because it was the first one to do it. It replaced all the pages and it was very successful, right? However, in 2007, when they were at the peak of their market share, if you like, iPhone came along, right? And this is again is a good example for especially for IT people like yourselves or people looking at IT solutions, is that people forget and focus on their own product, right? This is what my software does, this is what it is, all the bells and whistles. However, that's not what the buyers are buying your product for. You're buying the clients are buying it for their functionality, their ease. And in this case, iPhone came along without a keyboard, right? So you have to have a device where you have to have punch in numbers, and BlackBerry looked at the iPhone and said, hey, they can do that. They have. And essentially within a few years, BlackBerry is gone. And that's why probably most of you don't know about it. But in the early 2000s, it was the number one selling company of mobile phones, and now it does not exist. And I encourage you at the end of the session to Google BlackBerry and actually read a little bit about it, of how it failed, because it's a very good example of a company which is very successful, but really didn't realize what we call the sort of indirect competitors or replacing, right? The same can be said for the cameras, like Kodak and so on, many cameras and so on. There's now hardly anybody uses any cameras anymore, right? So the idea of this slide is to encourage you to actually continuously look at the competition, continuously understand your customer, continuously modify your product so that your customer is happy. Because in the end, the customer is key. If they or he or she moves away or finds something which offers them a better idea or a better solution, they will move on, irrespective whether it's a software or whether it's hardware or whatever. So that for me is a key slide or a key thing. And I will give you again an example from my experience in terms of why many IT companies miss opportunities, because they keep focusing on their product or software and not what the client wants. And by that, I'll give you an example where very early during my days in helping, I was helping an IT company to sell software for a dental practice. And the dentist in that practice was looking at expanding in three different cities. So consider it like in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah. And what the dentist wanted, or what the medical practice wanted, was to be able to access the data of their clients from wherever you are. So whether you are in Dubai, whether in Sharjah, and so on, the clinician should be able to log into the system and actually find the records of the patient, and so the patient doesn't have to carry with them any details. And when I met the company, there were three young people, right? The document, I mean, I have a master's in IT, right? I could hardly understand the document. The document was actually explaining the offering they made to the dentist, was showing, cloud computing, was showing service providers, was showing, it's a very technical document. And of course, the dentist essentially said no. So we sat with them and I said, look, all what you're doing now, and that will be familiar to some of the IT people amongst you, is that you're offering an in-house solution. So essentially everything is within the practice. So you have to have your own IT people, you have to have support. Another solution was what we call contract work. So they will have a contractor who will come and visit and essentially sets everything up and leave it at that. And the last solution was a cloud. And they were jumping up, yes, that's what we're doing. We said, that is nowhere near what this document is saying. So each model has a plus or a minus, and that's exactly what they did. They went back, that explained, right? No, not a single graph or server or cloud symbol or anything like that in the document, just like a 2-pager, right? Saying, hey, this is the in-house, you'll have full control, but obviously the most expensive option. And this is the cloud solution that will be the least expensive, but least control and so on. And I'm pleased to report that they got the job. But the moral of the story here is that they really were so nerdy, if you like, if I can use the word. They were so nerdy that really they missed what the dentist was actually trying to do. And this is really what this slide is about, right? Is that you need to understand your clients very well, right? So you need to do market surveys, you can do interviews, focus groups, and so on. Because when you're developing your product or pitching your product or service to them, you need to know what they are looking for. It is no use knowing all the ins and outs of your own software product if it's not going to be practical, right? And as I said before, I've been in government for 13 years, right? And so it's important that that you spend time and effort. And another thing I also want to say here, right, is that you don't need very expensive ways or hard ways to actually know things, right? There are I can give you a couple of examples of how I actually personally sort of done things, essentially with almost minimal cost. One of them was actually a wedding in the family. And I'm originally from Sudan, so our weddings are large, hundreds of people. And usually you will have the main event held at the house, if it's possible, or you hire a hall. So I wanted to find out, right, which of the 4 different drinks, right, is the most popular, right? So when they were delivering the drinks, they are essentially Coca-Cola cans, Sprite cans, Fanta, and another drink in a pink container, right? So what I did is as they were unloading it, I just made a note of all the numbers. And at the end of the day, at the end of the evening or early in the morning, I went back and counted, right? And it was very easy to see what's the most popular one. So in this case, it was the Coca-Cola, all right? So out of, let's say, 100, probably only 4 or 5% remained, right? Then the next was the Sprite, next was the Fanta, and the last one was the pink one. Hardly anybody drank that. I think in our house we were still having them several months later, right? So what am I saying here? I'm saying that you can have different clever ways of finding out what is a popular drink, right? Just essentially cost me nothing here. And so I would say that that piece of information would have been very useful to bring back to the company and say, hey guys, you're wasting your money producing this pink drink, right? Another one, which was actually an international example, is that a museum with a lot of famous paintings was trying to decide where to house the paintings, like in a sense that, where are the main interesting paintings, put it in the main room, and where are the not so interesting paintings to put it perhaps in a back room and so on. And so what they did, so instead of asking people and so on, all what they did is put some mats or carpets in front of every painting, right? And they left that for a while, probably a few months, right? Then they come back and look at the tear and wear on each carpet, right? And so very quickly, they actually found out which are the paintings which really attracted the most attention because they had the carpets worn out most. And that's it. So no surveys, no time, very simple investment of a few dollars for each carpet. And they now have a very good idea, or a ranking, if you like, on the popularity of the different paintings. And sorry, this is عندنا هنا الأذان خلاص أذان الصبح. So that what I'm trying to say here is that you need to understand the demographics of your market, right? In your case, if you're dealing with government, right, I strongly suggest consider what we call behavioral sciences factors, right? In terms of how people use or interact with government, right? Because that will give you an idea of what will work, right? For those of you who are interested, and if you have a pen or a paper or a mobile, please make a note of that. There is a book called Nudge, as in Nudge, by an author called Thaler and Sunstein, as in Thaleer, and Sunstein, as in Sun and Stein, Stein. And Thaler actually got a Nobel Prize for his work. And essentially what nudge does is actually explains to you why people do things in certain things. Sorry. Yes. So the name of the book is Nudge. N for Nigel, U for Uganda, D for Denmark, G for George, E for England, Nudge, right? And the author is Thaler, T for Tony, H for Holland, A for Apple, R for London, E for England, R for Rwanda, Thaler. I'll type it here so it's easier for you. The reason I mentioned that is that, and it may be actually even happening in the Dubai government, is that many government entities now have a behavioral economics unit or a behavioral sciences unit within government to actually advise or shape policies so that it actually works. So like if you are looking at changing people's behaviors, for example, right, you need to know why people are doing certain things. And so by knowing the theory of behavioral sciences or behavioral economics, you can actually understand, right? So just to give you a good example and see why that's something I would like you to consider, right? Is that behavioral sciences say that people are reluctant, people are loss averse. They don't like to lose money, right? So for example, here in Australia, now we're looking at reducing the use of plastic bags in supermarkets, right? And so when the original proposal came out, right, they were looking at, if you like, rewarding you. So if you come with your own plastic bags, right, you'll be rewarded. You will get something, if you like, free from the supermarket. The other approach was that they charge you, right? So if you don't bring a plastic bag with you, you actually have to pay for this one. And when they talk to the behavioral economic unit within the department or within the agency doing that, they said, look, the first one won't work, right? People will feel the pain more if they have to pay, as opposed to being rewarded. And that's exactly what happened. So now if you go to a supermarket and you ask for a bag, you will always have to pay. And it worked very well because it understood the psychology of the users and it reflected it in the policy. And so for me, with government in particular, but also with many other places or opportunities, it helps to understand how consumers, because in the end, the government is interacting with customers or with users, right? And no matter what they do, if they don't understand what you as a supplier of the software don't understand how people will behave, then it's not going to work. You might get the deal, but it has, because from the government point of view, they want a change or an improvement, and it's not going to happen if you misunderstand the human behavior. So yes, so I encourage you to actually look at behavioral economics or find out, actually, as I said before, maybe there is, like here in Australia, I did several online courses run by behavioral economics units in the UK and in Australia, and they're very insightful because they show you how certain programs were very effective because behavioral economics and behavioral sciences theory was used. Right. The next step of the steps we talked about is identifying your niche. All right, is knowing what differentiates you from the others. I mean, my understanding is that you have around 100 teams here, right? So you really need to stand out, right? It's no good to say, hey, I have a good one. You need to be able to highlight why you are better, right, than the others, right? So and how do you do that, right? You need to be able to understand what the client wants to do and say, hey, I have the best people to do that, right? So if the client is looking at something which requires, let's say, artificial intelligence, then you can say, hey, I have some of the top AI people here in my team, right? Or perhaps the client is looking at, as I said before, behavioral economics. I mean, that will your product change people's behavior? And you come back and say, yes, it does, because I have a behavioral scientist on my team. right? They will be able to tell us what's the best way to do it, and so on, right? So it's very important to sort of know that, right? So you have the capacity, you have the expertise, right? So, for example, I mean, I've been sort of told that some of the projects looking at is how to reduce waste in mosque, or how to make mosque more sustainable. For example, I'll use as an example, right? And there are two ways of going about that, right? There is a way of the mosque administration itself, but also there is a way of the people using the mosque, right? So using the taps, or using the services, and so on. So you can, if you like, in your proposal to the mosque, if that mosque is looking at you, hey, I want to make my mosque more sustainable. You can come back and say, hey, we can look at the taps of the water, for example, right? And we can have signs there, right, showing wastewater and so on. The idea is that you can show that your knowledge of behavioral sciences can help you put signs and other things in the areas where the attendees actually apply. Like, for example, the taps don't have too much pressure and so on. So you find that by highlighting your unique skills, or the team's specific skills, then you're able to differentiate yourself. And that differentiation, as I said before, is very dependent on what the client is looking at, right? So it's no use to come back and say, hey, I have very good experience in I don't know, construction, for example, but that's not what the mosque is looking at. The mosque is already being built, it's already being done, so they are looking for somebody who will look at running cost, right? Okay, so now you, as I said before, you've known your competitors, you've looked at the client, you've looked at your niche. Now you need to actually start developing it, right? So you actually need to actually have the strategy to differentiate yourself, right? And this is the key thing. This is, if you like, where, as we say, the rubber hits the road, right? This is what actually happening, right? So if you're selling a product, it could be by making the design nice, or perhaps it can be you market yourself differently, or you price it so it's value for money, and so on. And to give you, I'm using two case studies here, and they're actually my own personal companies. And the reason I'm using, because I know what happened, so I can actually tell you, right? But at the same time, they will sort of make sense to you in terms of what you actually need to consider when you are looking at differentiating yourself. So the first one is a building service company, and that was back in the Sudan when I just finished my studies in the UK, and came back, and I wanted to start a company, right? Building service company in this case was all about wiring and cabling and installing of electrical fixtures and so on in factories, residential and commercial, right? And of course, there are quite a few other players in the market, right? So when I got there, I was trying to find out and so on. And what I noted was that many of the players in the market, some of the key ones as well, were mainly electricians. So people, the construction company will win the contract, and usually most of the contracts there are won by the civil engineering company, and then the civil engineering company chooses the electrical one. So it's very rarely can you actually bid directly to the contract. So a lot of the people out there had, trusted electricians. So when they won the contract, they would just get an electrician and get them to go going. So really very low level of expertise in the work. And so for me, when I was looking at it, I said, look, I need to differentiate yourself. So what did I do? I did two things. One of them is I partnered with some of the key companies, so essentially saying, hey, you don't need to look for electrician, you don't need to sort of search around. This is us, this is our company, that's what we do, and so on. And the other thing I introduced, which was unknown at the time, was a warranty or a guarantee of our work. I brought back with me from UK equipment, as in test equipment, insulation testers, meters, and so on, so that actually can deliver on that guarantee. There's no use guaranteeing something if you don't trust your work. And so what I did then was I was actually charging 25% more than almost everybody else. So everybody else will say charging 20 per unit. I was charging 25, and I never had to search for work. Why? Because nobody was delivering that warranty. Like, I mean, in my case, we had a couple of clients who had problems, so we went back and did it, and essentially all covered. So the idea is that I knew that people wanted the peace of mind that you know, the electrical things will work fine. I needed to have a way by which I have ongoing business. So I partnered, or if you like, put my name with a few of the main construction companies, right? But the other thing as well with a lot of the electrical things is that was the main issue with many construction projects, is that the problems arise from the plumbing and the electricals, right? So for me, I solved that. So the client, the civil engineering company kept coming back to us. So I really didn't have to look for work. So in summary, it's that I came up with some, because I wanted to charge more. I mean, like, there's no use getting electricians, right, and doing the work, and then for you just to charge the same rate. Then you're not rewarding yourself or paying yourself. So I needed to be higher, but at the same time, I need to offer something different so that they are, if you like, there is a market for me, right? And as a good example of that is that we did a 5-story building in the second city in Sudan called Wad Madani, right? And I remember when I went a year later, right, the engineer or the service manager there said, once you set up the system and set it all up, we did not need an electrician for a whole year, right? That was unheard of, to actually have a building 5-story, different usages, what we call multi-use and so on, without a need for and so on. And of course, that came about because of the testing and so on. But the idea is that, yes, so you need to differentiate yourself, but also have the skills and expertise to actually deliver on what you are differentiating with. The other case study I'm using here is a migration agent. I used to run an immigration business here, helping people immigrate to Australia, right? And to do that, you need to have an exam. So I did an exam on immigration law, and thankfully I passed. But the moment I passed, I found that there are 60,000 other immigration agents here in Australia, right? So immediately you start, okay, or immediately you start your own business, you have 60,000 other competitors, right? And so I needed, again, to look at ways to differentiate yourself, right? So what I started doing was looking at how many of those immigration agents have a presence overseas. By that I mean is that they actually travel overseas, meet clients overseas, and so on. Obviously, their clients are overseas, so they all have to service overseas clients. But many of them only had websites. Many of them did things remotely, right? And so when I did that, and we have a database of all registered agents by law and so on, so I was able to find out that about 3,000 of the 60,000 have a presence overseas. So actually, so that was the first thing in my business, right? Is start traveling overseas. So straight away you drop from 60,000 competitors to 3,000. The next thing I looked at was who was servicing the Middle East, right? And in this case, because I was interested in that market, that's where I'm from, that's where I know people, right? And so I found that there are only 7. There are only 7 offices or 7 players targeting Middle East. Where are the other 3,000? They're mostly China and India, right? So China and India are overrepresented in terms of offices. So some of the agents here we have here, they have offices almost every major city in India or every major city in China. So they have huge presence. And so there's no use to go to those markets because there are many players. The third criteria I use is how many of those 7 offices. There was a couple in Dubai, couple in Qatar, one I think in Abu Dhabi, and one in Cairo, right? And so the third criteria I looked at is how many of these actually have Arab speakers, right? Essentially, what clients will understand, and none of them did, right? So they all actually had Indians, right? Essentially assistants who really had I mean, I actually went and attended a couple of seminars of those offices person during my market research stage, right? And they were very poor. Their understanding was very poor. They were over-promising. Like, I mean, you're listening to what they're saying and you're just shaking your head and say, this is a disaster. They really have no idea of how the immigration system works, right? So for me, that straight away is a niche, right? So if I start traveling to the region, if I meet my clients directly, speak to them in Arabic, explain the process, I'm immediately the only one doing that. Nobody else is doing. So that's my niche, right? And I actually also added an extra thing, just to make sure that nobody else does anything, is I actually offered services of getting the skills recognition. Because part of the immigration process is that you need to get your skills recognized in Australia. And I used to help with that, right? And again, that was not offered by any of the other migration agents. A lot of them were just interested in the visa because they don't know. I'm an engineer. I have a master's in IT, right? And I worked in this, so I could help people with those skills recognition things. So in summary, I found a niche, right, by doing that, and that was very successful. So I continued on for a few years, and that meant that yes, I have my niche. And so just in summary, so that's really what you need to do, is to look at, and as I said, in both cases, I looked at what the client wants. I didn't look at what I offer. I look at what they want, right? And so in the first one was building service company, the clients wanted peace of mind. They didn't want to have to go back and fix errors or problems in the wiring, right? The one with the migration, the clients don't really wanted a face-to-face meeting. It's a major decision. This is not a simple decision to move over. So they appreciated having somebody there in front of them whom they can talk to, like them, who's a migrant, I'm myself a migrant, so they can ask all the questions. So that's really key when you are looking at differentiating yourself, is that you try and find a niche for yourself. All right. So you're in business. Again, remember the BlackBerry, and you think you have all the market and so on, but somebody is, if you like, catching up with you from behind. So you need to continue the ongoing review, right? And again, I'm going to use my business as an example to show you why, what I have done. In this case, when I set up my business, I actually had a database. So every person who approached me or sent me an email or a message and so on was entered in the database. So at the end of the first year, I ended up with probably 200, if you like, leads, as we call them in our industry. And I then looked at or analyzed, and as you can see, it's very important to have this. It's very important to capture feedback from your clients. It's very important to go back and ask, how did I do this and how did I do that? You'll be familiar with it. Like if you go to a restaurant or if you go into, there's always that feedback form. And this is it. It's that to be able to change or tweak your strategy, you need to get that feedback from your clients. It's no use thinking things or assuming things. It's better to actually ask them. Right. And as I mentioned before, there are different ways of capturing that asking. You don't always need surveys or interviews. You can have other mechanisms of finding out, what people do. So in my case, when I went back to that database of the 200 people, right, I found that about 12 of them actually continued. So because what I used to do is once I got those leads, is I would send an email with some details, but very, very detailed email in terms of, these are the things and so on. And they people needed to read it and come back with some questions. And that got rid of the majority. So out of the 200, probably received a reply from about 20, right? And that's straight away tells you, the others were really time wasted. They're not interested, they're not motivated, and so on. So that's the first thing, is that I had a mechanism or a process by which I would screen out people, right? The next thing, I looked at those 20 ones, and I found that only 5 or 6 actually signed up, right? When I mean signed up, I mean that they actually signed a contract and they actually put a deposit, right? And so out of 200, I have 6. So then I looked at the 6, and I found that all 6 actually were referrals. What do I mean by that? They were not ones who looked at my website, or I didn't actually have a website at that time. I was just marketing yourself through the migration website and the migration agent's website. And I found that really the idea here is that those people will refer to you because somebody knows you are doing this migration business. So more of the story is, don't need to spend time on a website, don't need to spend time on marketing, just do a good job with current clients, and then you will get a word of mouth referrals, right? And that's essentially what you need to do with your strategy is visit it back and see, like, so in my case, I was looking at the end of the first year to spend money on a website, to have, you know, all sorts of things, payment gateway and so on and so on. None, I didn't need to do any of that. All what I need to do is go a good job, get feedback and testimonials from my clients, and use that for getting some new ones. All right. So we're coming to the sort of towards the end of the session. And what I like to do here is sort of to summarize it. All right. So as you can see, I said you need to make money, right? Idea needs to be monetized. I call it. This is my daughter Yasmin. All right. And so always says, Baba, we need to find ways to monetize our intellectual property, and that's key. Yes, it's yes. People find out that you are good at something and they keep coming back and so on, and you're doing it for free. No, you need to find ways by which you can monetize. In my case, I will do the first one for free, and when they come back, I will send them an invoice. And the next one is that you need to have the skills, right? As I said before, if you are bidding for work with government, right, you need to have a good understanding of, you know, what they really want, right? Many times people jump into conclusions and so on, and that's really where behavioral sciences comes in. It forces you to systematically try and find out what the end user is doing, or and so on. So it really forces you to answer questions very critically, right? And as the last one is why you're doing it. Are you doing it for to make it a better world? Are you doing it to make money and so on? Because that is your motivator towards the end. Because as I said before, it is very challenging starting your own business and not having that you know, weekly or monthly salary coming in, and all of a sudden you find that you have a family to feed. Then yes, so you need to be very motivated to sort of go on your own. And the next one, as I said before, are the 5 steps. So you need to know your competitors. As you said, there are direct ones, there are indirect ones, there are replacement ones. You need to know your customers. And again, as I said, behavioral sciences will help. So it's really very important to see why people are doing things in a certain way. Know your strengths, know about your business and so on. And as I said, these are strengths from the client's perspective, not from your perspective, right? So no use to come back to me and say, hey, I have an AI specialist in my team, but that is not a requirement of the client, right? And the client doesn't really need that skill in their solution, if you like. And the other thing is, number 4 is, as I said, develop strategies. As I mentioned before, the examples of the building services company and the example of migration agent is that eventually I found a niche, right? Why do you need a niche, right? Because it means that you can charge more, right? Because if you're only charging the standard rate, then it's what we call a race to the bottom, because you have to drop your prices and so on, and you'll find that you're not covering your costs, right? So no, you need to find a niche so that people come to you, right, and willing to pay you extra because you are the only one out there doing it. And the last bit, of course, as I said before, is you have to revisit and review the strategy. And as I mentioned before, remember Mr. Grove's motto, yes, only the paranoid survive. And again, I mentioned the BlackBerry. I'm just sorry, just bear with me. All right. Yeah, so the movie is called BlackBerry. And again, as I said, I would like you to consider that. All right. So now what I have in front of you here, sorry. Are words of encouragement. right? Because I'm sure that you are facing these things, and I personally found it very useful to actually have this sitting in front of me. I actually have a poster in front of me um, saying, never ever give up, right? And so that's really very important because when you're starting a business and when you're going alone and so on, it can be very challenging. And the first thing is to fight negativity, right? Because some people say, "Hey, you can't do it," right? Well, that's the first thing most people say is, "No, you can't do it." Well, I can, right? You need to network, right? When I say in the network, I'm talking about, meeting other people, looking at opportunities, right? Just sitting at home and punching your keyboard and so on. No, that's that we're still humans. We still appreciate the interaction. We still embrace the personal touch. So especially for the IT people amongst you, right? We're all very geeky. I'm an IT person, right? And for us, the idea of meeting and so on is just, people are boring. No, it's not. They are the ones making decisions to buy your product or service. So you need to sort of evaluate. So perhaps, sign up for different associations, be a member of different groupings and so on. But it's important to be out there, right? Many opportunities are rarely advertised, right? So somebody might say, "Hey, I want to do this," and they know what you can do, and you get the job. So you don't even have to bid or compete, right? Um, I am saying here, never stop learning, right? I'm having two websites there, edX and Coursera. They're both MOOC, what we call massively open online courses. I strongly encourage you to explore different things because, I mean, I did all my behavioral economics courses on those websites, right? So, and you really learn a lot from that, right? The other thing is respond to complaints, right? So for example, somebody comes say, "Hey, I don't have access to that. You're asking me to know about my client." But I said before, use different methods. Use the wedding example, use the carpets. There are different ways of doing your research without your standard structured, surveys and so on. No funding. I don't have the money to do it. Well, consider non-traditional funding, right? In our case here in Australia, a lot of the families and friends fund that. In Sudan, for example, when we had a survey by GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, we found a large proportion of our startups were getting funding from uncles and aunties, right? So yes, why not? No jobs available. Well, start your own company, so have your own job, right? And the last bit here is life is not fair, get used to it, right? This is the way things are, right? So instead of complaining and whinging, get up and do your best, and make sure when you're getting the opportunity to pitch for the work in government or to pitch for the work in a client, that you're doing your best, giving it your best shot. All right, I'm ready to go. Bear with me. All right. And this is my if you like plug for Australia, right? Um, I'm suggesting here that you consider sort of coming to Australia to actually look at some of our entrepreneurship things. But Australia doesn't always rank high in the entrepreneurship sort of tables. However, we have certain niches, right? And that is really what I'm trying to highlight here is that you don't need to be everything to everyone. And so Australia actually has a niche in a sense that the universities produce a lot of research, not very good at commercialization, but there is a lot of research. And so it means that you can come and see what sort of things, if you like, are happening in Australia. For example, the Wi-Fi is an Australian invention. The ultrasound is an Australian invention. Google Maps, every time you use Google Maps, that's an Australian invention, right? So there are. I mean, I worked in this, as I said before, 13 years in government, and part of our work was actually helping some of those startups, and there is a very good environment here for funding, venture capital and business angels and so on. So if you do come over here, it will be good. You will find out how actually here in Australia, governments, if you like, or other agencies are supporting startups. And like, for example, during my time in government, we actually had a special program to help businesses bid for government contracts, and we were running workshops and so on, and to help. So these are some of the things you can get if you like, first-hand knowledge of. And of course, if you like, in conclusion, then there will always be time for visits. So if you are into beaches, we have some of the best beaches around. If you like wildlife, we can take you. If you like forests and jungles, then we have it. So essentially, all of that we have it. And all our animals here, actually, none of them exist anywhere else, right? So we don't have elephants or tigers or lions. We only have kangaroos, possums, and so on. So you will actually meet animals who you have never seen before, right? And so yes, that's it. I'm exactly on time, so haven't wasted your time, your assets. And if you have any questions, please sort of post them now, so that if I can answer them, I'll try and do now. Otherwise, I might send them to the committee, sorry, to the team, organizing team. They can forward to you. And also, please, some feedback, if you like, in terms of how we are finding this. Did you find your time was well spent?